Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror, and today I bring you my June wrap up.
It's coffee time.
First things first, June passed by so quickly, like in the blink of an eye. The month was gone. And unfortunately, I did not manage to read all the things that I had planned, so I am still delayed with a lot of things and a lot of content, but we're staying positive. We're staying positive. At least I did manage to read 7 different things. One of them was a compilation of short horror stories. I even did a vlog about it and I had a lot of fun reading that. And even though the weather right now is still not exactly summer weather all the time, we're getting there. We're getting somewhere. But about time, because we're already in July. Also, you might notice that my voice is a little bit different today. That is because I am a little bit under the weather. I don't think I am exactly really sick or I have like a big cold. I think it's just the aftermath of Taylor Swift. I had to queue because I wanted to have a good spot. I had a good ticket. I had front right standing, but I wanted to be in a place where I could see the majority of her performance, which takes place in the Diamond. So I was there at 10 a.m. I started to queue and they opened the doors at 4:30 p.m. Paramore started at 6:15 p.m. and then Taylor hit the stage around 7:20 p.m. and she kept going for like 3 hours and 20 minutes or something. And I was screaming the lyrics and I was having the time of my life. And since then I have been a walking corpse and I still had to work even though my soul had not returned yet to my body. But I'm starting to feel better. I think it's just been like the whole ordeal of queuing for hours, and we got like 3 rain showers while we were waiting online, so we got wet, and I don't think that was something that my body appreciated at my age. But anyway, I had the time of my life, absolutely no regrets. And now let's get to what I actually read in the month of June. If you're new here, hi, welcome. I would like to promise you that I am not always this crazy and chaotic, but that's a promise I can keep. So welcome to our coffee times. Today I will review the books that I have read in the month of June, and I do review them with coffee mugs because it's just what I think it's fitting for this channel. And also I will start with the lowest rating to the highest so that we always end up on a positive note. Let's start with Now Conjurers by Freddie Koch, and this is a YA horror book, but I did find this book to be more of a dark fantasy than a horror book. I got this one as an audiobook from NetGalley and I have been listening to it for a while now, and I have finally finished it in the month of June. When I started to listen to the book, I was really addicted to it. I got really excited about the characters, about the story, about how things were being kind of introduced at the very beginning, about a murder mystery. I enjoyed that the book was kind of bending time a little bit, and I did enjoy at the beginning as well the dual timeline that you get here because it's something that I do like in books. But I felt like as the book was progressing, I started to get more and more confused about it, and I started to lose my interest a little bit in the characters, and that was not a good sign. I think I started to get really tired around 60%, and by 80% I was like out. But I still finished it because I like to finish the books if I can, so that, you know, maybe the ending redeems something for me. But unfortunately, I think this book was just not my cup of tea. The book is set in the 90s. We start in 1999 as a body is discovered in the woods from a popular kid from school, and they have to figure out what happened to him. So this book is based in the 90s, but I didn't get the feeling of the 90s. That was really missing for me. I think that was one of the things that I was missing personally. We get introduced to Nesbit, Dove, Brandy, and Drea, and those are our main characters, together with Bastian, and they are basically a coven of witches, and they have been learning how to work together and use their magic together. And I thought this book was going to be a lot more about witchcraft and it would have a lot more horror. It ended up being more of a dark fantasy, and I was missing a lot of the horror elements in this book. If you're going to do something a little bit more supernatural, like witches and magic, but you advertise it as horror, I was expecting a little bit more of creepiness. The narrator's voice also sometimes breaks the fourth wall, which is something that might not appeal to all readers. For me, I didn't really mind, but I did feel like at some point I was getting a little bit annoyed by the narrator, which is not a good thing. Now, nothing wrong with the audiobook. I think they did a really good job. It's not the actor's fault. I just think the way that the book is written perhaps is just not for me. They blend humor, charm, the supernatural, and I think it's a good blend. I think there is a good balance between all of it, and it is a well-written book. I just feel it was not the book for me, but I think many other people are gonna enjoy it. In fact, I am one of the few that did not enjoy it as much, because if you check Goodreads, you will see a lot of people loved it. So just because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it's not gonna work for you. Then I read Creature Feature, which is a short horror story collection that you can find in Amazon, and it has a total of 6 short horror stories, and a lot of the authors that are in that collection are authors that I had previously read, so they were familiar to me, and I was really excited to read it. I have a vlog on it, so if you want to hear all my thoughts as I was reading the stories, you can check the vlog. It is spoiler free. I don't spoil any big plot twists or any endings. And since I already talked a lot about the stories in my vlog, I'm just quickly gonna let you know what I thought about the separate stories. The Prem by Joe Hill, and this follows a couple that after experiencing a really traumatic miscarriage decide to move to a really quiet place, and they get an old farmhouse and they settle in this new community, and they start to realize that something is a little bit off with the people that live there. The husband always goes to get groceries from the store as the wife stays at home, and in one of his trips to the grocery store he's buying a lot of things, but he doesn't have bags with him to take it back home, so the owner offers to lend him an old Prem. Now, as he's using the Prem to carry his groceries, he starts to hear a baby's voice. This book was kind of like folk horror meets Rosemary's Baby, and I really enjoyed it. Ankle Snatcher by Grady Hendrix. This was my favorite one from the collection, because I think this is the one that had for me the biggest like gut punch at the end. Marcus grew up thinking his father was a killer. His father was accused of his mother's death, and the father kept saying that he's innocent and it was actually the boogeyman that took the mom. So as Marcus is older now and he starts dating, he realizes that his dad's story might actually be true and the boogeyman might be attached to this family. It was a very original story. I loved how he fused a lot of different things and themes that I cannot talk about because I think it's going to spoil the book for you, but I felt this was also one of the most like horrific ones because of the descriptive things that happened, and this was definitely my favorite. It Waits in the Woods by Josh Malerman, and this was the perfect blend between a thriller and an Asian folk horror tale. People are disappearing in the woods, and the last thing they see before they disappear is a white bridge. Now, in that bridge, legend says that there is a demon, a faceless demon that needs a face, so he might just take yours. Brenda's sister disappeared a couple of years ago, and she's determined to find out what happened to her sister, so she takes a lot of gear and she immerses herself in the woods, and she's determined to find the white bridge and find out what actually happened to her sister. I really liked the atmosphere of this one and the pacing. I felt like the tension building and the creepiness factor got elevated more and more as Brenda got deeper into the woods and she started investigating more about what happened to her sister. The only thing that I would criticize about this one is I was not a fan of the ending, but that is just, I guess, a more like subjective thing, but this was still a really good folk story. In Bloom by Paul Tremblay, and this one had a very interesting theme. but I feel like it never really took off for me. We follow a journalist called Heidi, and she's investigating recurring toxic algae blooms around the coast, and she interviews people there as well, and she's trying to get to the bottom of things. I kind of really enjoyed the beginning, but at some point, like I said, I felt like the story didn't really took off for me, and I felt a little bit let down. I did enjoy the writing overall, and I think it was atmospheric, but like I said, I just felt like it didn't have like it didn't land, it didn't have like a punch. There was something missing for me. Best of Luck by Jason Mott, and I know this is a lot of people's favorites. It was not exactly mine, but I was really in love with the premise of it. We have two friends and they meet one day, and one of them has had the best luck in his life while the other one has just had misery and really bad luck. So they start talking and they start to discover secrets and things, and they end up figuring out that they have a lot more in common than they knew. I think I really enjoyed the introduction and how the story was set up and the characters, and it got really unsettling, but then I felt like it got really repetitive for me, and that's why I didn't enjoy this as much as I would have hoped. Big Bad by Chandler Baker, and this was a really good kind of interesting werewolf story, as you can assume by the title and the cover. And I think they are even adapting this. This is a story about a family and a stranger that comes knocking at their door in the middle of the night, and he's asking to see the wife. We don't know why. He keeps coming and asking to see her. There's also werewolves somehow involved in the story. Not gonna tell you how, where, or when. It's for you to discover. But I felt like this book, something that it did right is the tension and the atmosphere. I love the story and the take on werewolves. I just felt like I was not as engaged in the story as I would have hoped. I was not as like invested in it. And those were the 6 short horror stories that were in the collection called Creature Features. So now we move on with some new releases. Take All of Us by Natalie Leaf, and this is the story of Ian. And in his hometown 5 years ago, there was these toxic bacteria that got into the water, and everybody that did not drink like pure clean water would get infected. The people that got infected basically became like a shell of themselves, almost like a zombie. And one day the city had to be evacuated, and during the whole kind of like craziness of the evacuation, Ian had an accident and he died and came back as a shell himself. This is not a spoiler because it's on the synopsis and it happens in the very beginning of the book. And after that, his mission is to go together with the other people that are also infected and try to find his best friend slash his crush, Eric. One of the positive things about the book is that it had great disability representation. There were several characters that had disabilities. Our main character, Ian, has epilepsy and chronic migraines. Monica is also chronically ill and uses a cane, and then we have Angel that is autistic. Even though this was a fast-paced and entertaining story, I wish that the characters would have had a little bit more depth to them, and I also wish that we would learn a little bit more about that toxic waste, that toxic thing that got into the water, that got people infected. Like, I wish we would learn a little bit more about that. But all in all, this was a great, quick, fast-paced book. Dead Girls Talking by Megan Cooley Peterson, and this is another YA book. This is a mystery thriller, and we follow Bettina. She lives in a small town where everybody knows everybody and everybody's business, and her father is well known, but not for good reasons. Her father was accused of being the smiley face killer and of killing her mother, and is currently in prison, so Bettina lives with her grandparents. However, now another girl is brutally murdered, and the modus operandi seems to be exactly the same as the smiley face killer. So the two options here are either we have a copycat, or the father was not the killer to begin with. The writing style was alright, it just felt a little bit more simple and straightforward, which is not a bad thing. And we follow Bettina and a friend that she makes as they're trying to figure out who is responsible for the murder. So they're kind of trying to find out who's the murderer. So it's more a, murder mystery thriller, kinda like, vibes of A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, because you have two girls that are trying to figure out what happened when the police didn't maybe do their job efficiently enough. So they're trying to figure out and uncover the truth. Things move along quite quickly, which is good for the pacing, but also at times it can feel a little bit choppy. But I really like Bettina as a character, and also Eugenia, which is the girl that helps her and is considered the weird one because she lives in the morgue because her family works at the morgue. So I love that they kind of joined forces to try to figure out who is the killer. Is really Bettina's father? Is it someone else? Is it a copycat killer now? So it's that type of murder mystery. The Night Guest, and I don't trust myself to say the author's last name, so I'll just put it on the screen. And this is actually the first book that I read in the month of June, and I really enjoyed it. I had at some point kind of like a love-hate relationship with it, but this was such a unique reading experience, and I would recommend this book to everybody just because of that, just purely for the chapter split, the pacing, the story. It was very unique. It's a story about paranoia, about society's expectations on women, and how when women seek for medical help, they are often misdiagnosed or they are not taken seriously. Our main character is a middle-aged woman who feels really exhausted. She doesn't know why, but she feels like something's wrong with her. She has been to multiple doctors, she has taken tests, blood tests, everything has been done, and nobody can really tell her what's going on. And so one day she decides, okay, let me try to be healthier, to track my steps, try to walk more. And she realizes one night that her step counter is over the roof, and she doesn't know why. She doesn't know if she maybe is sleepwalking, or maybe the watch that she's using to track her steps is wrong. So she's gonna have to figure out what happens at night. Why is she allegedly walking so much? Now, this was quite the interesting ride. It was very different, very creepy, and you are so invested. I was like, it's one of those books that when you start reading it, you cannot put it down. You just want to go back to it because you need to know what's going to happen next. And that is why I also gave this one a higher rating, because even though I was not so in love with some things that happened towards the end, this book had me on a chokehold. I will give you though a content warning for animal harm, just in case it upsets you as much as it upsets me. I knew it going into it, so I was kind of pre-warned. And this is a book that was originally published in 2021, but it has finally been translated into English. And like I said, it's definitely a book that I would recommend just because it was just so different, such a different reading experience, and I really enjoyed it. Next we have House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, and I am trying, as you guys know, to read more vampire books, and I'm really glad that I picked this one up because I really enjoyed it. So we follow Marion, and she is kind of struggling in life. She's not very happy, and she wants out. She lives in a very like poor neighborhood, and she wants to get out of poverty. She doesn't know how, but then she sees a listing on the newspaper, and they are looking for blood maids. They pay a lot of money for it, and she decides to go and see if she can get the job. So obviously she gets the job and she starts working in this place called House of Hunger, which is a big castle, and there is a woman that lives there, which is basically Elizabeth Bathory. That's the inspiration for this, and she takes blood from the girls. So that's, you know, you can expect that if you're a blood maid, it means you have to give your blood to someone. Of course, nothing is as good as it seems. They say that if you work for a countess, in this case in the House of Hunger, you get to retire in 5 to 6 years, and then you're still gonna get paid and get a lot of good money so you can buy a house. And that's what Marion wants, and she is determined to be the best blood maid so that she can retire and enjoy the rest of her life. Marion was a very interesting character because at times I was 100% on board with her decisions, and other times I just wanted to slap her in the face because she was about to make a really poor decision. But then again, it is a teenager, And then again, this is a new job that is really important to her because her future is at stake. So I also get why she would do things that are a little bit out of character for her or that are a little bit stupid. So everything was for a reason at the end of the day. And I do love when I find a character complex, or when I sometimes agree, sometimes disagree with a character, because it makes it more interesting for me as a reader if I have a character that I don't know exactly, you know, where they're gonna go next. The book was very atmospheric and I really felt trapped inside of that castle with all of the blood maids. And even though the middle of the book was a little bit dragging just because everything was very slow pace, I felt like the ending definitely paid off. The chapters were short and engaging and I really flew through the book, but this book was marketed as horror and I think this was more of historical fiction. A lot of the times there is a creepiness factor, obviously, but not everything that is vampires has to be 100% horror. So I feel like if you like books about vampires but you are not a huge horror buff, or you cannot take a lot of horror, this might be a good book for you. I definitely really enjoyed it and I do want to check out the other books by the author. And last but not least, let's talk about probably a controversial opinion. Let's talk about The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry, because I have seen that not many people have enjoyed this book and I can totally see why. The only thing is, I just am in love with Christina's writing. And I feel like that is why I got to enjoy this book so much. And it's another book that it had a lot less horror than I had anticipated. This was more of a mystery thriller than a horror, but I still loved it. Harry is a single mother and she is struggling to pay her bills. She is looking for a job that is gonna, you know, give her enough money to pay for the rent, pay for Gabe's school, her son, and she finds this job as a cleaning lady for a horror movie director, Jaime Castillo. And she knows him, she knows of his movies because she's a horror enthusiast herself. And she decides to take the job and she works in his mansion, cleaning all the rooms, but not only the guest rooms, also rooms full of horror props from movies. And she loves that and it's a good job, it pays well. But then certain things in the house start to creep her out. She hears things behind the walls, behind closed doors. She feels like there's voices, there is sounds. There's supposed to be nobody else in this house except her and Mr. Castillo, so where are all these sounds coming from? Personally, like I said, I love Christina's writing. I love how her characters are always very, very like real, raw characters. A lot of them have lived through trauma and have many layers to them. And even though this book, let me tell you, I feel like it was predictable, and that might be something that puts people off, but if the book is well written, I don't care if a twist really wows me or not. It was a slow burn, but for me, it did pay off. This book was, in my opinion, kind of like quiet horror, and you're trying to figure out what happened to Castillo's family, what happened in his past, what's going on in the house. So it was kind of more of a mystery to solve than a horror. The plot is good, but it's simple. I also love that you get chapters from Harry's and from Mr. Castillo's past in order to understand the present. That is something that I do enjoy because it starts to add more and more layers to the story and to the characters. And if done right, I really enjoy flashbacks. As I said, I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing, I enjoyed the characters. I was really invested with the story. I really wanted to finish it as soon as possible because I just needed to know. I loved Harry a lot as a character. And even though it was predictable, I didn't mind at all. I was not such a huge fan of the ending, but that is also something more personal to me. I would still recommend this book. I still really enjoyed it and I'm still gonna read everything Christina Henry puts out there. Alright guys, so that was everything that I managed to read during the month of June. Sadly, I didn't get to all the things that I wanted. I didn't get to read You Like It Darker by Stephen King and vlog it because I had absolutely no time for that. So I'm hoping to catch up with that, I think in August, because I think July I'm not gonna have time for it. So I'm not gonna put too much pressure on myself in the month of July, but I'm gonna try to sneak that in during August and see how it goes. It's also my birthday month, August, so I'm really excited. Hopefully by then the weather is gonna be better. Fingers crossed. So I hope that you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on all the books that I read during the month of June, and let me know down below if you read any of these books and what you thought of them, and what was your favorite read from the month of June. Thank you guys as always so much for watching, and I hope to see you all as always in our next coffee time. Bye!